This is Interbeing, held in belonging.
I'm home. I'm home. My heart is my home. It felt like pure love flowing through me. And suddenly you've been awakened to an energy in your own being, and it feels like you've become interconnected to everything and everyone around you.
Welcome. Take a slow breath with me and gently step out of the pace of the world for a moment. Let the mind soften just a little. Let the body arrive right here. Most of us have been taught to move through life as though we are separate from one another, separate from nature, separate even from the deeper parts of our own being. But across wisdom traditions, contemplative practice, in some areas of modern consciousness research, there's growing recognition that consciousness may be far more interconnected than we've been taught to believe. And when the feeling of separation begins to soften, something in life can begin to feel different. The world feels a little more alive, a little more intimate, as though beneath all the noise and striving, there's always been a deeper belonging, waiting quietly underneath it all. Moments where the boundary between ourselves and the world no longer feel quite so solid, where a deep breath arrives on its own, the chest softens, the mind grows quieter, and life no longer feels like something we are carrying alone. In this episode, neuroscientist and leading figure in the post-materialist sciences, Marjorie Woollacott reflects on an awakening experience that transformed the course of her life and led her beyond a purely materialist understanding of reality into the study of meditation, consciousness, telepathy, and the deeper nature of human connection. Together we explore stillness, interconnectedness, and what becomes possible when the mind grows quiet enough to truly listen. This isn't something to passively consume. The pacing, the silence, the spaces between words are part of the experience. So as you listen, notice what resonates. Notice what feels strangely familiar. Not because something new is being given to you, but because perhaps something ancient is being remembered. And maybe every moment we soften the illusion of separateness, we bring a little more presence, compassion, and aliveness into the world we all share together. I'm your host, just a grateful guy, walking with you into the quiet beneath the noise, where perhaps the deepest transformations begin through awareness, presence, and remembering our connection to one another and to life itself.
So it was actually when I was just about 30 years old, and I was starting a new faculty position at a university in Virginia, and my sister, who had been meditating for a year or two, asked me if I would like to have, for a birthday present, a meditation weekend at an ashram in the Catskill Mountains of New York with an Indian meditation master. And I was a materialist, and I didn't really have any interest in meditation per se, but at the same time, I noticed that I had a lot of anxiety in my life related to many different things as I was trying to live what I would call the perfect materialist life, which included having the right career, publishing the right papers, living in a pretty house, having the right boyfriend with a Porsche and things like that. And I was very unhappy. And it was like, well, that's interesting. And so what happened is that when she invited me to go to this meditation weekend, I said, sure. She did remind me that I canceled out a couple times because my boyfriend thought this was ridiculous. But then I went ahead and made a commitment to that weekend. And that first morning of this meditation intensive, there was a meditation, and we were told in that meditation that we were going to receive an initiation by this master, and it was going to actually involve a touch on our forehead. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I was skeptical, but I was also curious. So I decided at that moment to put my skepticism aside for the weekend to see what would actually happen. And what happened is that when he walked around the room and he came to me, my eyes were closed, but my senses were otherwise fully engaged, so that I strongly felt this experience of his hand touching me on the forehead between my eyes on the bridge of my nose, and then feeling what felt like a mini lightning bolt, like a current of electricity going down from his fingers into my being and down to the center of my chest, and I could feel the exact point where it stopped. And it felt like this exquisite energy pouring into my heart. And the feeling I had in that moment had nothing to do with scientific analysis. It was, I'm home. I'm home. My heart is my home. As I felt this energy radiating out from the heart through my whole being and beyond. It felt like pure love flowing through me. And I think that was the start of a shift in my whole world view. And I remember going home on the plane back to my position in Virginia at the university there and looking at a photo of this particular Swami, this meditation master, and saying, who are you and what have you given me? And the very next morning, I got up spontaneously and I meditated. And I have meditated ever since, every single day, no matter what. And so to me, that was that moment where something inside of me said, wait a minute. You thought everything that was important was outside of you, and suddenly you've been awakened to an energy in your own being, and it feels like love, and it feels like you've become interconnected to everything and everyone around you. And that really then started a whole new journey of trying to understand what else there is within me and around me that's more than just material reality.
What do you feel was being revealed to you in that moment?
My old beliefs were falling away in that moment because I now had an awareness of a reality that I had never experienced before. And it really felt like the essence of it was both love and interconnection with everything around me. And in fact, right now, as I'm speaking about it, I just feel this energy in the heart radiating outward, reminding me of that initial experience, which really has never left me. So I think it was like, yes, it was an opening up to understanding that the world is much more than I ever thought it was when I was a child or a young adult. It's like I really only knew about the five senses until that moment. And then it's like, oh, there are inner senses too. And they're related to the heart, and they allow me to be interconnected with everyone. What I want to say too is that in many traditions of the world, this happened to be a tradition from India called Kashmir Shaivism. And that tradition, however, is like many others where they say that when, in fact, infinite awareness, which is what we all are and are connected to, that's our essence, decided to go from simply pure potentiality to actually know more about itself by creating all the aspects of the world that we're living in, what it had to do in order to actually learn about itself is it had to become all the separate points of consciousness that are us and the animals and the plants and the trees. And in becoming those separate points of consciousness, it allowed it to learn about itself because it could learn from the other points of consciousness, but it also lost its sense of pure, expansive wholeness. And that was something that consciousness took on actually out of its own freedom so that it could experience this beautiful reality that we actually have in materiality. But at the same time, what it did is it limited who we are. But it says at some point in this creation of this beautiful, expansive universe, that consciousness says to itself, it's time now to know who I am again. And that's when we can have this recognition begin to occur that, oh, I'm more than just this physical body. I'm more than the five senses. And when that awakening, that recognition begins to open up again is when we have those moments. And it can occur, of course, through a great being, like in this case, a meditation master or perhaps a Buddhist monk or something like that, where they literally are transferring to us. It's like a transmission of their own awakeness, and we energetically feel it inside of ourselves. So my own sense is that it's universally there for all of us, and at one point or another, all of us will have that opportunity to actually shift out of our ignorance, I might call it, our sense of separateness, to a sense of being interconnected. And it is then that our living, powerful energy begins to explode into our life in new ways and help us begin to see who we really are, recognize our essence as interconnected with everything.
Where do you feel this understanding showing up most deeply in your work right now?
So in fact, I set out to write a book that is called Infinite Awareness, The Awakening of a Scientific Mind. And in that book, I explored all the phenomena that a materialist would perhaps not even be interested in. Things like near-death experiences and what do people have happen when their heart stops functioning, their brain is flatlined, and yet they feel their perception leaving their body and going to the top of the room and watching the resuscitation team in a hospital all around them. Or other things that I've done, like, for example, working with children with telepathy that have non-speaking autism. And this is my latest research, and I'd love to share that with you because that has opened me up now to another deeper level of understanding about who we are as human beings. What happens with some of these children is that eventually their parents understand that there's a really wise being inside, and I have to find a way to communicate with my child. And often then they learn to communicate with them through, for example, letter boards, or they teach the child to use a computer keyboard. And now the child starts communicating with them and saying what they really know inside. And the children say beautiful, wise things about the world and about their parents and about themselves once they can begin to communicate. And they tend to often have telepathic abilities where they can read their parents' minds, they can read other children's minds. One of the beautiful stories is coming out when we have interviewed a number of these children. After hearing about them on Kai Dickens' telepathy tapes episodes, I began to do research in the area, and the children go to a place in what I would call mental space that they call the hill. What they say they do is they'll go home to their rooms and they make their mind quiet.
In the silence beneath thought, something within us remembers its connection to everything.
They then reach out telepathically to a friend somewhere, and then that friend is doing the same thing to them, and that's how they begin to connect. And they communicate with each other telepathically there from their own rooms around the world. And they make new friends there, they learn new things there, and it's their way of actually connecting with others that have the same ecstatically wonderful ability. And one of the things that we just had an interview with one of the children recently and his parents, and one of the things that child said, we asked, well, can you have telepathy with anybody? And he said, well, yes, I can, but I often don't want to because some people have terrible thoughts in their minds, and I don't like to hear their terrible thoughts. And so I tend to prefer to really be very selective in who I listen to. And I thought that was fascinating. And I think that they, in fact, say that most people could communicate telepathically, but most of us just don't try to. We don't realize it. And it's so easy to communicate via words that we don't bother to actually make that effort to be receptive and to communicate in that way.
What allows that deeper sense of connection to emerge?
The quieter the mind is, obviously, the more receptive we are to our own higher self, but also then to our connection with others. What I think meditation does when you are practicing it on a regular basis over time is that it allows what I would call my higher intentions, which are actually based in my prefrontal cortex of my brain, to actually inhibit my impulses that come from deeper down in what we call our emotional or our limbic system. I think the other thing that seems to be very important with these children is that they really feel interconnected with the rest of the world. And therefore, they don't have the usual egoic tendencies that so many of us have when we feel separate. They don't feel that feeling of I and mine, and I deserve this, and you shouldn't touch that aspect of myself, or you shouldn't take this from me, or whatever else. They feel love for everyone. And when I've talked to some of these children in the interviews, I've asked them, like, who do they communicate with telepathically beyond, for example, their parents or friends? And they say, oh, well, I communicate, for example, with the trees. And in fact, I asked this one boy in this last interview, I said, well, what are the trees telling you? And he said something that was actually very poignant. He said, the trees are telling me that they're very sad about what we're doing to the environment.
What if the world has been speaking to us all along, and we've forgotten how to listen?
When you get in touch with all these other parts of our world, whether it's the trees or the wildlife or even things like the mountains, it's like they do have their own sentience. They can communicate their understanding and their wisdom to us if we really quiet our minds and listen.
How can we become more aware of that interconnection in our daily lives?
For me, cherishing what I would call the sacredness of everything around me, including my own self, and realizing that I am a living, vibrating entity which is full of love and connected with other things. And for me, it's partly allowing myself to take time to be aware of that interconnection. And partly that is through being still, because if I fill my life with being on the internet and going shopping all the time and hanging out, just having a good time with my friends all the time, distracting myself, I'm going to have a harder time getting in touch with that beauty and that essence that lives within me and lives with everything around me. I find that spending time by myself in nature is one of the most important things I can do in the world. It's like when I do that and I become still, then nature can talk to me and I can feel its own loving essence and its own desire to actually communicate. In fact, someone once said something to me that I cherish. She said, every time you say thank you to a tree or a plant, it remembers it for 500 years. And I feel that sacredness and that connection whenever I'm out in nature. So every morning I go for a walk in the red rock country of Sedona, and I talk to all the flowers that I see along the way, especially in springtime. It's like, oh, you're back again. You're so beautiful. I'm so happy to see you. And then I might see something else and say the same thing to that. And it feels like I have this strong interconnection with these plants, with these flowers, with this beautiful red rock country around me. And I feel enthralled during that walk. And, it reminds me that we live next to this big, beautiful rock called Courthouse Butte. And I remember at one time hearing that Ramana Maharshi, the saint from India, had once been talking to somebody about the very mountain that is near him called Arunachala. And someone said, well, do you think that God, Shiva, lives in that rock? And he said, no, God, really that rock is Shiva. It's not that something lives in it. It is absolute consciousness manifest as this beautiful Arunachala rock. And I feel that about the beautiful sacred rocks around me as well. I feel that essence within everything when I'm walking. And here's an interesting thing about that. When I've actually done research on getting into those beautiful states of awareness, they say that it's usually associated with the feeling of awe in nature. And in fact, awe does exactly the same thing to the brain that a deep state of meditation does. And that is, it turns down this one network called the default mode or the mind-wandering network, so that all our narrative becomes very, very still. All of our egoic identities begin to just dissipate and draw down inside of us to very, very quiet levels. And suddenly, with that quieting of all the internal narrative, we feel the expansive of the universe around us. And therefore, in feeling that expansiveness, it's like we then feel the connection. And there we are now back to our essence of who we really are.
What do you feel humanity most needs to remember right now?
I think the only thing I want to share with people is that there are difficulties when you're doing spiritual practices and you want to have that experience of oneness with others, and you get frustrated with yourself or with life. I often think that one quality I need to work on is patience with myself and others and the world. And so it's more like, can we just relax a little bit and realize whatever is happening in the moment is right for us. And whether it feels pleasurable or not so pleasurable, we can actually learn from it and feel more deeply underneath the surface that connection with everything around us. Because once we shift to really feeling that we're interconnected with everyone because we all are connected through that consciousness, it makes us shift the way we treat each other. And we feel that we're all part of like one living organic tree. We're all branches on that tree, and we would never want to harm another branch of our own tree. It's like the idea of the waves on the ocean. Underneath the waves are the interconnection of all of the water of the ocean together, and that's who we really are. So for me, it's more like, okay, Marjorie, relax in this moment, take a deep breath, and realize that this moment is what you're supposed to experience. Don't push it away, be with it, and enjoy it for what it is.
Before you return to the pace of your day, I want to invite you into a small experiment with consciousness this week. Not something to believe, something to feel for yourself. Marjorie Woollacott has spent her life exploring what happens when the mind grows quiet enough for a deeper sense of connection to emerge. And maybe those moments matter more than we realize. So sometime this week, step outside of the noise of your life for a few moments. Go somewhere life feels undeniably alive. Sit beneath a tree that has been silently breathing long before you arrived. Stand beneath the night sky. Feel the wind moving across your skin. Let yourself stop striving for a moment. Just breathe and fully arrive where you already are. Then notice what begins happening when the mind slows down enough to truly listen. You may notice the body soften, the breath deepen, as though something inside you is finally unclenching. And if you stay there long enough, there can sometimes arise a very quiet recognition that you are not separate from the living world around you, not standing outside of life, but participating within it. Then quietly say, thank you. Thank the tree, thank the air, thank the life sustaining you in this moment. Because gratitude changes the way we perceive the world. The mind stops relating to life as something distant or separate, and begins relating to it as something sacred that we already belong to. It reminds me of a person sitting beside a violin for their entire life, believing it to be nothing more than wood and strings. Then one day, someone lifts it beneath the chin, draws the bow across the strings, and suddenly the whole room fills with music. The violin was never empty. The music was always there. Gratitude is a little like that. It draws the bow across the strings of the heart, and suddenly life no longer feels mute or mechanical. And maybe moments like these matter more than we realize, because every time we soften the illusion of separateness, we bring a little more presence, compassion, and aliveness into the world we all share together. And maybe real change begins exactly there, in ordinary people carrying a little more awareness, a little more reverence, and a little more love into life around them. One breath, one moment of gratitude, one softened heart at a time. And in doing so, perhaps we slowly become the kind of consciousness this world is asking us to grow into. Until next time, remain held in belonging.